Hi guys, happy Friday. Thanks for joining us. We are Igor and Anu. We are the owners and founders of Vinousreverie Wine Merchant, the shop for the adventurous wine drinker.
Yes.
We're based out of Walnut Creek, California. And you're watching our Friday show for the adventurous wine drinker. And every Friday, what do? We try different, interesting, unique wines from all over the world.
Yeah.
And we talk about them.
Yeah, that kind of showcase our motto for the adventurous wine drinker. So just interesting grapes outside of the California norm. So
yeah,
if you could just showcase the bottle, Anna.
All right, so we are having this wine from Slovenia.
Yes, Stekar is the winery, and the name of the grape is Sauvignonasse.
Sauvignonasse.
Yes, so there's multiple. It's one grape, but it has multiple names. So this is the name that Slovenians call it. It's actually called Friulano in Friuli region of northeastern Italy.
It's right on the border, right?
It's right on the border.
Okay.
We'll have a map a little later in the show. We'll actually show you how close it is. The other name it goes by is Tokaj. It's actually used to be called Tokaj Sauvignonasse in Slovenia, but because Tokaj is the famous region in Hungary, that region kind of basically said
they protested.
Yes, we'll sue anybody who uses our name. Kind of the same way that champagne is threatening to sue
it
everyone.
Makes sense.
Yeah. When any sparkling wine is called champagne, where only champagne could be called champagne. But I think the name that's in all the books, it's under Sauvignon Vert, and it's actually related to Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
Yeah. So unlike Sauvignon Blanc, though, it's typically a fuller style wine, where Sauvignon Blanc is on the lighter side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Friulano or Sauvignonasse, it's fuller. There's nice acidity to that, and we'll actually kind of explain why the acidity is like that. It's zippy, and it's a late ripening grape. So one of the things it's concerned when you grow it is that you want to avoid mildew, which is easily gets. And also
for this varietal.
Different varietals have kind of different diseases you have to kind of fight against. So mildew is for this one.
Yeah, that makes sense because currently I have a lot of anxiety about the zucchini in my garden. So.
Yeah. In the diseases that's associated with that,
I've been
right?
Googling those lately.
Yeah. So
tangent. Sorry.
No, go ahead. So I was mentioning it's late ripening. And you need to kind of control. It grows a lot. What's the term that they call it? It has high yields. You have to control its yields in order to make great wines. When it's too much, it's grown. That typically the wines are watered down. So that's a little overview of the grapes. So it's right there on Italian-Slovenian border.
Oh yeah, should we show the map?
So let's go now to the region in. Slovenia, what's growing on. So if you guys could see the purple circle, it's called goriskabrda.
Isn't it red?
It's red. It's like crimson or
It's not purple. It's a red circle. Okay.
Yeah. So it's between the town of Gorista and Brda, and Brda actually means hills. So it's a high elevation region.
Okay.
Yeah, I like a lot, and you guys can see that there's actually, if you look to kind of northeast, that's the Italian Alps. So it hits the Alps and the Adriatic Sea at the bottom. So it's got kind of elevation, and it's got some sea influence from the water. Even though it's about 40 kilometers inland, so it's not right on the sea, but there's still influence. Majority of the soils there is shale, marl, and sandstone. And marl is like a key to some of the characteristics of this wine.
Okay, I've not heard of that stone before.
So marl, it's clay-like characteristics. So it delays ripening. So as I mentioned, the grape is a late ripening grape, and the other thing it gives is it gives great acidity to wines. So wines that kind of grow in marl, that's their typical characteristics, which is a characteristic for this wine. On one hand, it's fuller bodied, but on the other hand, it has great acidity. Sometimes, wines like Viognier, for example, it's a full-bodied wine, but it does not have acidity. So that's just kind of like a difference in that. So this is kind of the overview of some of the details, and the region's been making wines since at least the 1200s, and they've been growing this grape in the Friuli, Slovenia region since about the 1600s. So if you could show some I guess pictures of it.
Yeah, I found some pictures of the area, and it's just beautiful. So very, very lovely vineyards, landscapes.
Yeah, a big tourist destination.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah. So there it is.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, and it's literally Slovenia and Friuli region. They grow some of the same varietals and very similar expressions. They're actually like walking distance apart. So the actual wine region. We had a winemaker from Slovenia last year when we actually did in-person tastings, and she was saying that where they make wine, it's walking distance to cross the border to Italy. So that's how close they are. It's been the Romans were cultivating wines there. Napoleon was a big fan.
Because I mean, people don't think of Slovakia and wine for some reason. So.
Slovenia.
Sorry.
Slovakia also makes wine, but this is Slovenia. Yeah, I know this. Very
it's
similar.
Late. I need more coffee.
So I think that's the overview. So now if we talk about Stekar Winery, they used to be when it was they were coming out of the Soviet Union, and it was communist controlled. Quantity over quality was what they wanted to make. So a lot of Eastern European wines suffer from that because they were making more average, sweeter wines to kind of meet the palate of the region versus the drier palate that kind of the Europeans like, that the Western Europeans like. So over the past 20-25 years, they try to build up their reputation again for great dry wines.
Okay.
So the Stekar family, they used to sell it to the co-ops until like the mid 1980s, and then they decided to start bottling it themselves. So they grew the wine and started bottling the wine, and it's very natural. So this is natural wine.
Yes.
Even though there's no kind of definition for it, there are some kind of aspects to it. There's no additives, very little sulfur is used.
Sulfites,
yes. Yeah.
What was that video you sent me?
It's actually a great video. So on YouTube, you guys could watch it. It's called Wine Revealed. Yes. Episode 1.
Yeah.
And there's an interview with a gentleman who works in Napa and makes dry farmed wines. And he goes into detail about the differences between natural, the way natural wines are made and the way commercial wines are made, which is majority of the wines made in California, even the high-end wines are made in a commercial manner. So yes, it's a great review. And these guys are obviously natural. This qualifies as an orange wine. And orange wine is because it happens because of the extended fermentation on skins.
Okay, that's the definition of an orange wine.
Yeah, so it's not free-run juice like typically you make with white wine. You have extended maceration, and the skins give it like the deep orange color instead of the light color that a lot of the white wines have.
Okay.
And then also this is unfiltered wine. I'm not sure.
Well, I did pour it earlier, and I'm not sure.
Look how cloudy it is.
It's definitely cloudy.
And a lot of people think that's a faulty wine when it's unfiltered, but it's actually winemakers' decisions. And there's enough data that actually says that these particles, a lot of the nutrients are actually in them. So when you super filter everything out, you're actually filtering out some of the best parts of the wine.
Right. So, can I go back to that video that you sent me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, because actually there were some really, you guys have to check out that
Wine Revealed.
Wine Revealed. It was really cool. He talked about natural wines and how there's no certification or standard, but you mentioned generally that sulfites are not added as much. That's one of the, and I'll kind of get into that a little bit. They always are organic or biodynamic. And they use wild, natural yeast. And a couple of things about it were super cool that I did not know. First of all, sulfites are added in wines, conventional wines, typically to sterilize the wine, basically kill all of the bacteria that are present in the wine.
Yes.
And that's the effect of that is a little bit of kind of he used the term McDonaldization, where it kind of standardized it.
It's a great term.
Yeah, and versus when you're making natural wines and you only add a little bit of sulfite basically to stabilize the wine.
Yes.
So basically stabilizing the wine or like completely sterilizing it. Making it shelf stable versus completely killing everything. So I thought that was interesting. And the effect of that is that, these sulfites, much less of it, they have more variety in the flavor of the wine.
Yeah, so he was using extreme examples when they're making a kind of that McDonaldized wine.
Yes.
They want the wine to taste basically the same. So when a consumer recognizes a brand and keeps buying that product over and over and over, year after year after year, they want to make sure that the wine tastes exactly the same. Or as close as possible to being exactly the same.
But that's not the case for natural wines.
Yes.
Because they don't put that many sulfites. You may have the same vintage wine in a case of wine, but the bottles in the same case they'll be tasting a little bit different.
In extreme situations, when you buy a case of the wine that was like a natural wine, 2 bottles could significantly be tasting different.
Yeah.
And that's because they're using a natural yeast and very few sulfites. So you kind of have the wine, it kind of has a mind of its own. It wasn't kind of, lobotomized like it is in a lot of
lobotomized, that's a good word.
Commercial wines.
Right.
So.
And you mentioned yeast, so that takes me back to using natural wines are made with wild natural yeast versus conventional wines are made with genetically modified yeast. And I thought this part is super fascinating. I did not know that genetically modified yeast can withstand higher alcohol percentages. So obviously that's kind of a symptom. We're seeing a lot of these, corporate wines, high, alcohol content. And the other thing is that genetically modified yeasts are used to create specific flavor profiles, which to me, I'm like, okay, well, that's the whole point of, you're growing these grapes, you're trying to get the terroir, the varietal, but it looks like you can use the right type of yeast to manipulate the whole flavor profile of the wine. So that's why, I think using natural yeast is the authentic creation of wine. You're talking about terroir, the grapes shining through instead of, creating a specific marketable taste.
Well, yeah, and for example, this is a full-bodied wine and 13% alcohol, which you probably hardly ever find in California wines now. And he kind of touched on that too. It's actually very fascinating when he was talking about natural yeast and the higher alcohol percentages. So he was also saying irrigation.
Yes.
So, So do you remember what he was saying about?
Yeah. So, dry farming. And he was talking about how some people say dry farming is impossible in California, but that's absolutely not the case. You can dry farm, and that's what's good for the environment. But also it's good for winemaking. And I hadn't made this connection, but when you irrigate the vineyards, your grapes have more water content. So you have to pick them later. And if you pick them later, they have more sugar. And when you have more sugar in wines, then you end up with higher alcohol. Yes. And, the higher alcohol, that's...
It's more addictive. So higher alcohol makes you want to drink more alcohol. And so he actually mentioned it. It's one of the dirty secrets in the California wine industry is that they don't want to put in the ingredients on the wine label because they want the consumer to keep buying their high alcohol wines. And he went to mention different aspects, how a lot of these California wines, people say like, I like these wines, but I wake up with a headache. And then from a lot of these, either dry farm California wines from smaller producers who use the natural processes, or a lot of the family-run European producers, the same thing with lower alcohol. You're like, I drank more than I typically drink in Napa, and I don't have a headache. What's the connection? So he kind of explains some of the connection there.
Well, even more so, I didn't know that the label is not required to be accurate. Yes. He was talking about how when you read the alcohol percentage, I just believe that that was the alcohol, but apparently they're allowed to be off by 1.5%, which is a rather large margin.
Yeah, and they're usually off with a higher percentage.
Higher. They're never lower.
So they're showing it's 14%. It's probably, it could be, not probably, it could be 15.5. Yeah. So, and that's from lobbying. So that was very fascinating. But he was talking about how a lot of there's butter notes on the buttery Chardonnays, and there's fruit forward on the cabs. And he made a connection how that's the palate that a lot of, well, Californians do have a lot of that on the palate, but it actually comes from exposure to processed foods and sugars. So he made a connection. That's why Californians won those wines. That was fascinating. Yeah. So because they eat processed foods and sugars, they like those wines, and it's like
higher sugar content. Okay.
Yeah. So because interesting, there's actually a fascinating story, the way, like, what the actual story is versus when you get like this legendary story, and people start going with the legend, which is nowhere close to the truth. It's actually very funny because John Ford had a great film, Who Shot Liberty Valance, yes. And he actually mentions that exact fact. He said, if truth does not agree with the legend, print the legend.
Okay.
And so this is where we start. So the gentleman in Wine Revealed, he was saying until the early 1970s, all California wines used to be dry farmed, and they used to be 12.5% to 13%, 12 to 12.5%. Now they're 14.5%, 15%, 16%, easily. They're ballooning into that. And they're not in a lot of regions in Europe. Yeah. So a lot of people are saying, oh, it's global warming. That's the issue. And he was saying, no. So in the mid-1970s, they started irrigating. Yes. And irrigation, first of all, there's a connection that irrigation brings in, like, bad chemicals versus when it's dry farm. Mm-hmm. And second of all, like you were explaining, it becomes watery, and there's more alcohol. You explained the process great. But what's interesting about it is, in fact, the CNN just read yes. the fictional story last week yes. about the Judgement of Paris.
Yes. So the Judgment of Paris, can you give like a quick overview?
Yeah.
In case,
so then, Steve Spurrier, who was a British journalist, he thought that the California wines in the 60s and early 70s were great, mm-hmm. on par with some of the best Bordeaux in the world. So he did this a taste-off where he took 5 California wines versus 5 Bordeaux wines. Mm-hmm. And in
a blind tasting.
In a blind tasting, yes, with international reporters. And California wines dominated the tasting. So California wine finished number 1. And I think majority of them finished in the top 5. Maybe 4 out of the 5 were California, over like the first growth Bordeaux. So I mean, some of the best wines in the world.
Right.
So that happened in the early 70s when those wines were dry farmed.
Yes.
So now California is like, hey, look, guys, we have the best wines in the world. Remember that tasting in 1970 that we won? That was because we make the best wines in the world. And because we make the best wines in the world, we could charge the highest prices in the world. Well, right after that tasting, they started the change in the process. So none of these California wines done in the new processes will win anything. They won't win awards over those first growth Bordeaux, but the truth doesn't matter now because the legend took over. And like I said, CNN is already running with the legend, and they're kicking it to the masses. So everybody's like, oh, California wines are so great for you. But like, if you look at like wine scores and stuff like that, yeah, some of the like Ridge or Harlan Estate, who sells the wines for, $300, $400, $500 a wine, they're great wines. But those like $80, $90 cabs, they're absolutely mediocre wines. They're taking premium prices mm-hmm. because they're like, oh, this is a Napa cab. This is better than Bordeaux, which is absolutely not true. So this is just kind of things how fiction starts overtaking reality. Yeah. And you have these absolutely inferior wines in many situations. Obviously not across the board.
There are some, and we've had them on our show. We've had some amazing Napa, Sonoma wineries. They're small. They make family owned. Yes. Family owned. Yes. But you know what blew me away about his video? Yes. He said that due to corporate consolidation, 52% of wine is made by 3 conglomerates. Yeah.
So there's crazy. Gallo, the biggest in the world. Constellation brand is right behind him.
Right.
And the third one, I'm not sure. He didn't mention it, but I don't know. The third one is, but
it continues. He says there are 30 companies that make 70% of wine. Mm-hmm. But you know what's the biggest fraud in that is that there are all these labels when you go shopping. So they don't want to say, hey, this is owned by a conglomerate. They all still have the family names and the stories printed on them, but they're not made anymore by a family. They're made for mass production. They're owned by a corporation. So, when we're knocking on, Napa wines that are high alcohol, we're not knocking on actual family owned, made by that way. We're knocking on this conglomerate, which is designed for production.
And a lot of them are.
Yeah.
Over 50% of Napa wineries are owned by these conglomerates. So, and all of them are like, we're family owned. And they show the history of the original family who started the wine. But that's not who owns it now.
It's not how it's operated.
It's not how it's operated. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, and I mean, you could tell frequently by the scores. Just do a little research on some of these expensive wines and the scores they get. The scores are not very high. I mean, we frequently, in our shop, we have higher scores on wines that cost $15 or less from like Spain or Portugal, countries that don't have kind of legend behind them. They just have, honest, good wines. Which
well, you have, winemakers that are really obsessed with their craft. Speaking of points, this wine got 17.5 out of 20 for James.
Which is a spectacular score. It's like a 93, 94 point wine.
Very high. Yeah, very high score. By Tamlin Curran. She's the staff writer for JensRobinson.com, which, we like that.
She's very literature geeky. She's very whimsical in her reviews, but every time she wants a review, you want to taste the wine.
Yeah, I love her reading her reviews. They're great.
And this one, $23. Just once again, put it in context. Last time anybody had a cab, please let me know. The last time you had a Napa cab that got 93 points for $22.
No.
How many decades ago?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Anyways, back to this wine. That was a fun tangent. That video was awesome. Thanks for sending it to me.
Wine Revealed. And he goes into way more details, and it's very very educational.
Yep. Cool. Well, you got anything else, or can we talk about this actual wine that we're tasting?
Yes. Well, you kind of took some of the notes, I think, some of the tasting notes, and you have some pairings, right?
A few pairings, but mostly I'm just really into Tamlin Curran's description of this wine. How she described this wine, I wish that's how people would describe me. So I just have to quote it. Defiant and proud and complex is how she described this wine.
Wait a minute, that's how I describe you all the time.
I wish. Anyways, but this is a really, it's got like such a great nose. When you smell this wine, it's intense.
Yes.
It's intense floral and citrus. It smells amazing. And I agree. I think there's jasmine. I think there's like a very strong citrus, kind of like a green wild herb, a little bit of apple, kind of just a tiny bit of mint, green, pears. This is a very unique wine. It's very interesting, very memorable tasting wine.
Yes, very distinctive. And like you were saying, there's a lot of these flavors in harmony. I think the best thing she said about it is she said, an intoxicating gypsy of a natural wine. So
it's a very long finish.
Yeah,
it just stays on your palate. I'm kind of like, okay,
no,
it's still going.
No,
it's very nice.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah, and I've had Friuli wines from Friuli region in Italy, so from the same grape, and this is definitely tastes different than I recall the other wine tasted. So it's just fascinating. Close together, but different winemakers, just maybe a different soil composition and a different expression from the same grape.
Yeah, so very interesting. Yeah. So if you're looking for something that's like tame, typical profile, this isn't for you. If you want to try something really fun and adventurous, this is a great wine for that. And I would pair it with it's because it's got such a strong flavor profile. I think like kind of Asian dishes.
Yeah.
That's what I went with.
No, I agree. I mean, just sipping it by itself is just
it's good, right? On its own.
Just so many flavors just popping out. It starts out with some of the herbal flavors you were talking about, and then kind of more of the fruit citrus flavors on the back palate of the wine. So, delicious.
Yes, really great wine. Awesome.
Fun story, yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it. You got anything else?
No, it's a cool overview. Thanks everybody for joining us. Hey, if you know friends that are into geeky wines, let them know about our show, about our shop, And we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, guys.